What is it like to be the child of a billionaire? My parents were not billionaires in the American sense, but we belong to the 1% in India. My dad is a self-made man. Growing up, he and his 3 siblings had very little to share amongst themselves. He only had one pair of slippers which needed constant mending. He studied under the street lights to cut down on the electricity bills and lived in a small house that would flood up every time it rained. Compared to his classmates and colleagues, he was probably 100 times more diligent. This quality remains to this day. He is extremely driven and motivated. He worked his way up and ended up extremely successful. I won't go into the details. Growing up, I saw very little of him. As a child, I remember saying hello to my dad when he called from sat phones from mid-air remote countries. Even as a child, my mom told me that sat phones were incredibly expensive. I had no idea what a sat phone was until I grew much older. I distinctly recall one incident that happened when I was 6 years old. My dad was returning from one of his international trips. I remember the moment my dad stepped into the room. He had brought with him from Japan a massive custom-made doll just for me. I started wailing uncontrollably. I had no idea who this man was and what he was doing in my mom's bedroom. The doll scared me and I thought he had brought it as a reward for allowing him to spend time with me. I rejected both the doll as well as my dad. Throughout my teenage years, I saw very little of my dad. It wasn't until my early 20s that I really started forming a bond with him. I grew up in a really wealthy family, old rich European nobility. We went to private schools, traveled a lot often and everywhere. We grew up with other rich kids, so that was a normal standard for us. The greatest difference between us and our friends was that we couldn't have everything we asked for. We weren't allowed to receive presents unless it was a birthday or an official holiday. Our friends used to receive presents for any good grade they got in school, but I never did. That was just seen as my job. We didn't see our parents that often. We grew up with a bunch of babysitters and au pairs. We were expected to know the value of money, to put money in our bank accounts ever so often, and to know how to clean our own rooms and be able to help around do chores. The reason? If you can't do it yourself, you'll never know if the cleaning lady is any good. When I first met ordinary people, I gave for granted tons of things, not knowing it wasn't easy for people to have what they wanted. It took quite some time to get adjusted to real life. When my granddad died, he left the family all of his money, except that a big chunk was missing. I have an hypothesis, but no evidence. My parents never even bothered to think of it. That's what being rich is, not bothering of where that much money ended up, and it is much money for any normal human being, myself included. My siblings work for the family business, which they'll inherit, along with money and houses. I do my own thing. I'm expected to succeed or I'm not getting a single penny. I am living in a flat which is as horrible and small as they can come, because that's all I can afford at the moment. My parents aren't going to help me out, nor do they now, so now I really know what life is on both sides of money. What bugs me is the double standard they use with my siblings and me. Everything else, I'm glad I received it while growing up. And maybe if I managed to succeed on my own, it'll be just a greater reward in itself than what my siblings have everything ready and served by someone. Even though I'd be more than glad to receive some extra help to be able to live without worrying about food and gas and rent. Not all billionaire kids are created equal. So for the rest of this post, I shall share my experience. I attended an elite boarding school in Switzerland and went to a top university. My parents are on the Forbes billionaire list, but not a well-known one at that. I have never realized that my parents were quite as wealthy as they were, but I always knew they were part of the 1%, although I didn't quite realize that they were billionaires. Growing up, I had a team of assistants working for me and had a full-time butler. Whenever I wanted to go on vacation, we took our G4SP and our team. My parents were never around my side. My parents told me that I will not be getting a majority of their fortune if I don't succeed entirely. My experience may be different than new money billionaires, tech billionaires, but there was basically an invisible hand providing money pretty much my entire life. After my parents told me that I wasn't getting even $1 billion, I had to imagine my life without my parents' billions. They were not typical billionaires. They weren't elitist and treated their staff well, but ignored their children. I hung around a few of those while I was in India. Externally they were all what you'd expect. One guy got a new Mercedes, different color, every day of the school week, while other wore a Rolex watch. A few got Ferrari as a gift if they did well in their exams. Most of them had their life decided for them by their parents long before they made their own decisions, which BTW sucks. But the biggest difference was what I have realized is the biggest difference to me back then was their network afforded them with knowledge that enabled them to do these interesting things that I or some of my other friends couldn't imagine doing. The way I see it today after 15 years, 11 of which I've spent in US so far, this difference is dwindling faster because of growth of Internet of Things, cheaper smart devices, things like Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, Google, Bing have made it affordable for us to learn and experience things completely new and go in directions that we wouldn't have. A billionaire is a billionaire because of knowledge and experience of something we haven't yet, but to me knowledge is power. My wife's best friend always dated rich men. Nothing really special about that. She finally married a man from a very rich and prominent family. We all became close friends. What was interesting about this was he was not from the working part of the family. That is, there was a set of heirs that were seemingly destined to get the majority of the goods by working in a family business, and those who seemed destined to be the millionaire playboys. I was impressed that the working part of the family were the sort not to be trifled with, for any reason. Our friend did not like to talk about them, and I got the feeling on the rare occasion we met, that they didn't like our lot either. I'm sure every family is different, but I got the impression that when the family money is not merely rich but also powerful, that a very different sort of dynamic emerges. So I learned something about being a kind of downscale rich by hanging out with our friend. I will echo that personalities of people who get everything they want are interesting, but there was a kind of aversion to wanting particular trappings of power and prestige that I noticed in our friend. It was very much like a liberal bias that viewed corporations as evil and greedy and subversive. He seemed to cultivate a taste for the wacky and arcane and illogical and perverse to distance himself from that world of the workingers. I only saw his side of the story and I understood how it was personal. It clearly was not an easy life for him when it came to family matters. On the other hand, it was really cool to meet some of his friends. Despite the fact that he was on the short end of the inheritance stick, he did get to travel and collect people, including an astronaut and a hip-hop group. My family is worth £3 billion. My mum migrated to London when she was just 6 years old. Mind you, our wealth is mixed of old money and some intelligent investment and loads of hard work. We belong from a small village in Punjab. Our ancestors have been living in the village since 1787. We have thousands of acres of land, and yes, I belong to a farmer family with a lot of investment in other businesses. I grew up in a palace where everything was served to me right where I wanted and how I wanted. I was a very spoiled brat. I had an elder sister and a brother. I lost my brother in a car accident and sister when she was 6 months pregnant. Thus came a huge change in me. I realized soon that money can never change what destiny has set up. Money is just a mean to achieve temporary happiness. I don't party, I don't do drugs, nor do I drink. Yes, I have fleet of cars, a nice house right in the center of Delhi. I have friends who I grew up with, friends who always had my back. I don't flaunt my cars or how rich I am. I take the metro whenever I can, fuck Delhi traffic. I do charities, a lot of charities. People who have found who I am, please keep your mouth shut and hands in pocket. Hi, I wanted to answer these questions from what has occurred in my life. Please be aware I am not a child of a billionaire or a millionaire or let alone middle class. This question that I'm going to answer is based on my experience 2 years ago, about 2016. I have lived in Seattle for most of my life, and as you most of know, there are well about couple billionaire in the cities, which are Bill Gates, Paul Allen, Jeff Bezos and others. I somehow had mutual friends with this one girl I came across in university, and none of her friends knew who she really was. On the other hand, I actually liked the girl just because of who she was and therefore only talked to her for her status, fame, family name. At that time I did not let her know that I knew who she was and what kind of family she belonged to, because I didn't want it to seem needy and someone who going for her family name and not her. Surprisingly, over a couple months I started talking to her, and let's say she fell in love with me, which was my goal, because I wanted her because of her last name and her status and not for who she is. Over time we had great conversation, and the thing that struck me was how much of down-to-earth she was, from driving a Toyota Camry to living on one of the most richest zip code in Seattle mansion. No attitude, and just another human being. Over the months as I talked to her, we had gotten in a very bad argument in which somehow made me really mad, and therefore I told her the truth in why I started talking to her in first place, and how I was using her for her family name and nothing else. Ever since that day she has blocked me on every scale you could think of from her life. But what I have learned so far for that experience is that they are just another human being and nothing like in the movies. They have the same feeling me and you have, but I must say they do it better, and was life then this and that what they also realize, but strive to keep the low-key and hang out with normal people who you and me can't really think of. Thank you. I'm not a billionaire's son, but one of my friend is, and I have written this answer based on few things that he has shared with me. Initially, at a very young age, there is no big difference because almost all of us are pampered and coddled and provided with whatever we want. But when I was a bit older, a sense of pride started to build inside me, and I developed a superiority complex because of the enormous wealth my father possessed. And for a boy in his teenage, being the leader of a group is the ultimate happiness. I was the leader in my gang of friends. With money comes power. I know I can mess up big time and always be bailed out. I always land up in foreign nations for my vacation, and every expensive activity was my favorite hobby. My father had a lot of acquaintances, by virtue of which I happened to meet some smartest people on earth and was gifted with some valuable time with them. Education has never been my problem, not that I'm technically sharp. My father is financially strong. I ended up in a top university. And now, I stay away from my home for my technical education. Probably the one best thing that has happened to me in my life. I stay in a hostel. The world appears to be completely different for me right now. I suddenly get this Gautama Siddhartha, Lord Buddha kind of enlightenment. All these years, I had lived in a protective environment created by my father's money. I have to learn to live on my own. And this is what every billionaire's son feels at some point in their life. It feels amazing. My father started from humble beginnings as a boy in a little fishing village. He was introduced to school by Christian missionaries because of the relationship they had with his parents. He developed love for education and performed really well in his academics. He got a scholarship to study in the UK in the 1960s. He met and married a British woman, and they came back to our country together. He became pretty well off subsequently and had children then. Now, it happened that he was the heir to the throne of our community and he assumed it. After some time, he established various establishments. I was born around this period, so I met the money. Due to my father's humble beginnings, I wasn't spoilt or something, but I got almost everything I wanted. I was allowed to interact with other kids from other backgrounds, so I knew I was privileged. My father sent me and my siblings to the best schools, and he never hesitated to spend money on education, and he always rewarded success. Unfortunately, he had a stroke 2 years ago, so a lot of his establishments crashed due to poor management. There's still money, but not as much as before. We have adjusted fine because we were never made to feel like a billionaire's kids in the first place. We still get to attend the best schools in the world and enjoy a lot of privileges. The only downside is the constant monitoring because we could be kidnapped at any time. The most important advantages to me are the best education and healthcare we enjoy. It is quite normal for a young man from rich family to enjoy his luxurious life. Driving a sports car, wearing fancy clothing, living in a big house, having a hot girlfriend, and of course spending a lot of money on everything. However, an exceptional one will truly choose an extraordinary path of life. I don't really know what is it like to be the child of a billionaire, but I want to share an unusual story of a billionaire's son. Nanda Krishnan, a successful businessman that has business interest in media, oil and gas, telecommunications, gaming, entertainment and property. Nicknamed OK, currently he is estimated to have a net worth of $7.9 billion according to Forbes' latest annual list of wealthiest people, making him the second wealthiest in Malaysia. 27 years ago, the billionaire lost his one and only son. He started to look for him and his search stopped in a Buddhist monastery in North Thailand. Shocked to see his son in saffron robes, short hair with a begging bowl in his hand, the father invites his son for a meal. His son politely refused and replied, "With all my wealth I can't even afford to feed my own son." It all started during a retreat in Thailand, where the son wanted to visit his mother's family and took up temporary ordination as a Thai forest monk. He was 18 then. Growing up in UK and Malaysia and could speak few different languages has made him quite open to different culture, and to him a temporary ordination could be something fun. That was the first time he encountered Buddhism, something that was very new to him. His aim during that time was simple, and according to a talk that he gave at a Theravada Buddhist temple in Malaysia some years ago, his initial plan was to stay in the forest for just 2 weeks. He had never thought of becoming a forest monk. In fact, he had been thinking to quit on day one. However, what he experienced during the stay at the forest temple had totally changed his worldview and perception towards life. The initial 2 weeks plan had now become a permanent one. He had never looked back, and after more than 2 decades, he is now an abbot of Daodan Monastery, located in National Forest Reserve near Thai Myanmar border. His name is Vyajan Sirapneo. Ak and his son. The billionaire paid a visit while his son at a meditation retreat in Malaysia a few years ago. I have 3 houses in 3 different countries. My dad is a marine biologist, while my mum is a retired dentist and now just a housewife. It's complicated. I can be taken advantage easily, but we have to give back. We always do donations and hang out with orphanages as volunteer work. Realistically, as a child with billionaire parents, it's not fun cause your parents are always working and we rarely have quality time with each other, and it's hard to be connected with friends who are low-income family. And you can't tell whether they're friends with you for who you are or for the money, so most of the time I like to isolate myself. Lol. One thing I learn here, just because your parents are rich, you don't be too pampered. I am also doing part-time jobs. Also, we've been robbed once. Be careful. My advice is, stay humble, hide your rich identity. So to be fair, not sure how to answer this. To enter a town and the streets, geography, etc. are all because of the history that you and your family has written, is amazing. Then to also see the swarms of people who all try to duplicate and or replicate your family's name and family's history is both annoying and kind of humbling. When you see many of the things that make up the net worth of your family, be they not only the focal point of others' lives, but something that they seemingly worship, again is rather humbling. Countless times, to have to face lawsuits, scrutiny, fake news, false press report, and even legislators take swipes at you and your family, well, that is not all that appealing. To have gov officials seeming at the brink of war against your family because you have money and they do not like that they make less than $100 K and or that they cannot gain access to your accounts. All the while, there are just as many in office who your family own, and their entire identity is based upon the commitment and or that they belong to your family, as did their fathers and their fathers' fathers. As you get richer, to see that there are swoons of wealthy people who are looked upon in society as the richest people in the world, while your family withholds their net worth from the tabloids, which results in people believing that people who just live in your city, not own the city, are more wealthy. It is truly amazing. Elected officials are sometimes rather quirky. There are some that are brown-nosed central, offering to do this, vote for this, etc., while others are all banana republic and are all about sweeping reform. I like when we hire peas to collect dirt on them and then bury them under their ill-gotten deeds, just because we can and just because they are new kids on the block. It is amusing to watch them burn under the spotlight. I love watching them all lie through their teeth, knowing we own them and their families. It is a great feeling. While I'm not related to a billionaire and I don't know any children of billionaires, I've known some children of people most people would think of as quite rich. My quick and dirty observations. 1. My Catholic high school drew from all economic classes. The rich kids, some, not all I stress, came to understand they had privileges other kids didn't have. Nice clothes, nice vacations, nice cars. It was very easy for them to rationalize they weren't the winner of the Lucky Sperm Club, but they had actually done something to deserve these privileges. It was earned by them, not a lucky windfall. 2. Many self-made millionaire parents would start to use the money as leverage against a son or daughter. All kids rebel at some point and to some degree. Parents who started poor and became rich through hard work would constantly remind their kids that kids have stuff they didn't have. And these things could be easily taken away from them. The kids didn't ask for the cars and clothes, but they can't fathom a life without them. A friend of mine put into this situation nearly took her life when she was in high school. My family is from India. Our family has business interest in a company that has costliest share price in South Asia. Right from birth I can get anything I need. My education right from kindergarten is one of prestigious schools. Right after my school days I was educated in one of top university in UK. Now I'm in family business. Right on school I got everything I need and I'm only student in class who has advanced gadgets and everything in advanced. Being billionaire gives me great connections. We always party with people from Bollywood and have married women who also from a billionaire family. Today our children have enjoy what we enjoy. My father isn't exactly a billionaire, but he is very rich regardless. My father got his money through the death of my grandfather, and before he played football professionally as well and earned a lot of money doing that. I had a lot of perks growing up. My siblings and I had the best education imaginable. We have worldwide connections, we traveled often and stayed in the most luxurious hotels. But my father had his own issues he neglected and that ultimately lead to a lot of things going wrong. I mean, sure we have financial stability, but I remember once when I was a kid, I think I was 4 or something and I was just learning how to swim. My cousin was over at my house and my father was drinking with his friends. And I got out of the water to show him something, but he threw a sack of coins in the deep end and told me to fetch it. The only thing I wanted to do was make my father proud. I mean, this is a man with 3 PhDs, so I delved into the water. I remember grabbing the bag, but I didn't come up anymore. After a while my cousin went to get my older brother to get me out of the water. My dad was still just drunk and laughing with his friends. And it's just one of the many scenarios. I'm sure some children did have better relationships with their billionaire parents, but mine was very toxic. I am not a child of a billionaire. I belong to a middle-class family. Yes, I have come across some of them. Every child was different from others. Few boast about their richness and wanted to join their father's company. They were least bothered about studies. They were sure about their secured future. Some of them wanted to explore their talent and wanted to prove themselves. They wanted to come out the shadow of their parents and were struggling to look out for a way to convince their parents. A few of them were tired of socializing. They wanted to stay aloof, away from gathering. They don't get enough attention from their parents and are taken care of by maids and servants. So, it totally depends upon the upbringing of the child, as some are over-pampered and some long for the quality time with their parents. My grandfather is a billionaire, and father is a millionaire from the Middle East. Things are as you might expect: luxury cars, designer clothes, fancy summer houses, VIP treatment, meeting celebrities, staff. A lot of women, gold diggers and prostitutes, booze, drugs, adultery, and gambling from an early age. The family environment was also quite formal compared to how other families probably are. Other than that I would say things are similar to any other well-off family. Most are absolutely clueless and have no idea what they are supposed to do seriously. They just occupy space and time. Plenty of kids are billionaires here in Silicon Valley. Some are very well mannered, but most can't have a conversation. They go to the Ivy League schools and are just lost folks. You forget about yourself and really feel for these kids. Look at the Forbes list. So many lost souls that inherited billions, no clue what to do. So when you become a big shot, just let me know. We'll let the kiddos hang out in the Tenderloin for a couple of hours. They'll have purpose in life. In short, it's lame because they can never get respect. Rogerber driver. Real lessons from the road depends. If your parents teach you right, then you will be even more successful person with a vision and goal already set in your life. You will have a lot of burden and responsible, but you will have everything you want, good one, not bad stuffs. You are not spoiled and you can live in the harshest condition despite being born in wealthy family. If your parents doesn't know how to educate you properly and never have time for you, plus you are spoiled to the core, then you will be a trash of the society. The difference is that you are filthy rich. What lies in front of you is doom. When your parents passed away, you will spend all the money like crazy, go broke, and if you are addicted to drugs, you would probably do some crime and got caught for it.